Hey y'all, I am Michelle Mazelleغ. Welcome back to my channel. I'm going to share with you all this video clip and then I'm going to come back and talk about it. So let's get into it.
Beware of Black people and stay away from them. They are not good people is one of the first things that my mom was told when she came to this country. I am a first-generation immigrant child. My parents came here back in 1993 after the Somali War. My parents came here as refugees and they were taught the ways of the Americans by white people who were helping them stay in hotels, giving food, shelter, etc., etc. My mom told me a lot of things that the guides would tell them. They would say, these people, they're Black, they get into a lot of crimes. I wouldn't suggest that you mess around with them.
Now, in the comment section, you have definitely had a lot of people that were agreeing with what she had to say, as far as that they were also African immigrants who were also told that they need to stay away from African Americans. They were also told to, just distance themselves from African Americans. So you had a lot of people in the comment section that was agreeing with exactly what she said. Now, what's missing from this conversation that nobody is really talking about and should be talking about in 2024 is what was being told to African Americans. What was being told to African Americans about African immigrants? What were being told to them about people coming from the African continent? Because in order for there to be a conversation, a true conversation, African Americans have to acknowledge, and they also have to tell that we were also told about people from the African continent. It wasn't good things we were told. As African Americans, there has to be acknowledgement of that fact. We can't have this conversation and act like that there was no negative things told to us about people coming from the African continent. Now, as an African American, I can tell you that I didn't learn anything about the African continent until I got to the 5th grade. I don't remember learning anything about the African continent. I do remember vividly seeing on television almost every evening the Save the Children ads of starving children from various African countries who didn't have any water, who didn't have any food, dying from illnesses. That's what I definitely remember seeing quite often. And I remember in the 5th grade watching the movie Roots. Now, why we was watching the movie Roots in the 5th grade, I don't know, but we watched it. And I remember enjoying the movie so much. I loved Roots. I was so glad I was able to have seen it. And I don't remember learning anything else about the African continent for the rest of elementary school. I don't remember learning it in middle school. I don't remember learning it in high school. The next time that I got any type of African American, African history or anything like that is when I went to college. And it was the only African course that was taught at the school. And it was a course that everybody wanted to be in. So you had to sign up early because it filled up really quickly. And I remember being very disappointed because I thought the class was literally going to be an African history class. Like we was going to learn about the African civilizations and the African empires and, colonization. I mean, I thought we was just going to go from the beginning all the way to the present time. And that is not what the class was about. So I remember us reading the Ditch Digger's Daughters, which is a pretty good book, talking about just the relationships within African American families. And that was about it. So I was really disappointed from that course. Because I definitely didn't get out of it what I wanted to get out of it, but at least it was an African American course. So growing up, I can vividly remember just being told at the dinner table. If you didn't want to eat the rest of your hamburger and fries, well, if you don't want to eat it, I know somebody from the African continent will be able to will want that hamburger. There's starving children over there in Africa who ain't got food, or be grateful for the roof over your head, because there's African children over there that don't have homes. They living in huts. They walking around naked. They don't have clothes. I mean, this is what I remember growing up, being told about the people from the African continent and the African continent itself, as if it was a barbaric, uncivilized. There was heathens living over there, and you didn't want to go over there. That's what I remember being told. I think I said in a previous video of 2 girls from Kenya that came to my high school, and I can't remember what grade I was in, but I definitely remember the conversations that were said about those girls in the hallway from the African American students. Can definitely hear the snickering, the taunting, them making fun of them because they had short hair, they dressed differently because of their accent, and because they was from the African continent. And so they had a lot of negative things to say to them, because being from a small town and getting students from another continent was just something that never happened where I was from. I can remember when I first started dating my husband before we got married. I can remember some of the things that was told to me. Is he going to be, is he with me for my green card? I remember the first time I went to Ghana, there were some of my family members who were fearful of me going, didn't want me going. Was I going to get back? Was I going to starve to death? Was I going to run around with no clothes? I mean, anything negative that you can imagine, that's what was thrown my way. Not to mention when my children were born, when my daughter was born, really, because my son really grew up overseas, but my daughter, some of the things that was said to her with the sounds, those types of sounds that was given to her for just no strange reason at all. So that's what I remember as an African American, and how other African Americans saw people from the African continent. So what African Americans were being told, anything negative about the African continent, that's what African Americans were being told. And so they took that same mentality to any person from the African continent that they came in contact with. And there were a lot of African Americans who would tease students from the African continent, who would tease people from the African continent. There were definitely some African Americans who thought they were better than African immigrants because they were told that people from the African continent didn't have nothing, didn't have food, didn't have water, didn't have clothes, didn't have a home to live in. And so, yeah, they had, there were some African Americans that had a very high superiority attitude towards African immigrants. And that's the type of acknowledgement that as African Americans, we have to own our part in that conversation. We got to own our part. We know we were not being told anything positive about the African continent. There was nothing good being said about the people from the African continent. Absolutely nothing. So if you're constantly being told that, there's no way in the world that you can sit back and act like that you had great things to say about African immigrants when you came across them. You did not. And that's the conversation that also needs to be circulating, that needs to be shared. When the people from the African continent came over, there was a sense of superiority, because as Americans, we were always told that our country was rich, that we had an overabundance of resources, and that the African continent had nothing. They had nothing over there. Nobody wanted to go to the African continent. Nobody wanted to visit there. I mean, anything about the African continent that was positive, I don't remember hearing any of it growing up. Absolutely nothing. Now, when the conversations are had between the two groups of people, and some African Americans want to kind of overlook the fact, or they want to ignore the fact of how some of them did treat the people from the African continent when they came to school, and how they talk bad about them, how they tease them. And then there's some African Americans that don't want to talk about that. They're like, you know what, the African immigrants, they need to get over that. That happened long ago. But then when the conversations is reversed, the African Americans want to bring up everything that somebody from the African continent said to them. And it's just like, but wait a minute. I thought you just told them to forget about what you said. Why wouldn't it be the same when it goes to you? There's some African Americans that don't want to be held accountable for their part in the division that's happening. And so when they're called out, called out on it, then all of a sudden you're not for black people, you don't support them, you're against them. And it's just like holding somebody accountable doesn't have anything to do with support or not support. It means to allow you the opportunity to see that you have a part in whatever's going on in order for their growth to be made. I strongly believe that within the African American community, there's always a situation where being the victim is okay. When we're talking about police brutality, when we're talking about the injustices in the black community, when we're talking about politicians who only care about the black community when elections roll around, yes, we can definitely pull out that victim's card in a minute, because we are still victims of injustice. We're still victims of discrimination. We're still victims of racism in the United States of America. That is an issues that we're still facing, that we can definitely say we're still victims of. We have not overcome those things yet. We will overcome them, but it hasn't happened yet. But there's some situations where we're not the victims in some situations, and we can't play a victim just so that we can, just so that you can kind of separate yourself from the issue and not take some blame on the issue. And this is one of those issues that African Americans can't put the blame, can't put the victim card out. You can't put the victim and say that, oh, you've had this said to you by African immigrants, without then going back and saying, okay, now what have you said about African immigrants? What has been told to you about African immigrants? That's how conversations is going to be had. That's how discussions are going to take place, when there is acknowledgement, not just from one side, but also from the side of the African Americans. All right, that's all I have to say on the topic. I am Michele Mazelleغ. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.